Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri, homage to all the lineage benevolent masters. The supreme, profound and subtle Dharma is difficult to encounter in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate the supreme bodhicitta. Today we'll continue our study of the Bodhicharyavatara. The author of the Bodhicharyavatara, Master Shantideva, we've also briefly introduced some of his life stories before. I think here I'll also tell everyone one of his stories. Bodhisattva Shantideva, as we introduced before, went to a forest and relied on a guru who was an emanation of Manjushri. After receiving the teachings, he attained accomplishment. We already taught this before. So later, with his guru's permission, Master Shantideva went to the cities to propagate the Dharma. He traveled all the way to a city in eastern India called Mankada. In the city of Mankada, the king at that time was recruiting ministers under the king and some guards and so on. Later, people thought Shantideva was extraordinary, so he became the king's guard. That is to say, an inner minister protecting the king. At this time, because of his power and his compassion, many people around Shantideva respected him greatly. Shantideva also taught them the Dharma principles. Many people were relieved of suffering and obtained happiness. In this way, people all respected him greatly. At that time, some treacherous ministers were dissatisfied with him and then complained before the king, saying this god was unreasonable because his actions were unreasonable. Even the sword for protecting the king was fake. Indeed, at that time, he had a sword. And this sword was made of wood, a wooden sword that was also blessed and bestowed by Manjushri. At that time, many people kept complaining like this before the king. After the complaints, the king also required that each of his attendants' weapons be re-inspected. At that time, Shanti said this, "My sword, it's best you don't look at it. If you want to look, there may be some danger." But the king wouldn't listen and insisted on looking. Later, he said, "If the king really must look, go to a quiet place, and it's best you cover one eye before looking. That would be better." Later, the king did as told, and indeed, when he looked with one eye, the eyeball fell to the ground. At that time, he was also very frightened. Everyone present also knew of Bodhisattva Shantideva's great attainment. Later, all the attendants, including the king of Mankada, before Shanti, after he ordained he was called Shantideva, but now he might be called Shanti. But this can also be used. It refers to the same person. At that time, everyone repented before him. After repenting, later the king also kept respectfully praying to him to restore his eye. Finally, Shanti also agreed. After agreeing, he took the eyeball with his finger and inserted it into his original eye socket, restoring it as before. So at that time, his attainment was completely different from others. Everyone should also remember this matter. I think, incidentally, Bodhisattva Shantideva's 7 rare biographies, when convenient, I'll also introduce them to everyone. The Bodhicharyavatara, composed by such a great accomplished master, Shantideva, the content we're now going to teach, the text says this, completely and correctly revealing the Mahayana path. This Bodhicharyavatara is divided into 2. First, the title of the treatise. Second, the meaning of the treatise. Here he says in our treatise, the Bodhicharyavatara, the entire sequence of the Mahayana's basis, path and fruition has already been completely taught, and it has already been correctly and accurately taught. These words, in the process of studying, everyone definitely shouldn't just pass over them quickly. You should seriously contemplate, why is it taught this way? Because if we study this Bodhicharyavatara well, we can say all the teachings of the entire Mahayana are included within. It already encompasses all Mahayana sutras and treatises. In our degenerate age, in our brief human life, to know all Mahayana sutras and treatises like the palm of our hand is probably unrealistic, quite a difficult matter. But if we spend a period of time and then diligently and seriously study this treatise, actually all the sequences and all the teachings of the Mahayana Bodhisattva path will already be understood. So this meaning is quite great. I think, especially for people in big cities nowadays, to truly attend a Buddhist academy or go to a monastery to study the relevant teachings completely is quite difficult. Systematic, very complete, sequential opportunities for this kind of study are almost non-existent. But I think if we ourselves regard the Bodhicharyavatara treatise as the most important thing, we should treat it this way. Now, many people attending classes and studying Dharma, actually they put their livelihood as the priority, and studying Dharma, researching Dharma, and practicing Dharma are placed in a secondary position. This is many Buddhists' attitude. What's their attitude toward Buddhist studies? It's like this: putting their eating, drinking, entertainment, or livelihood, work, and so on as most important. And in the world, mostly these things occupy their time. So I think on one hand, probably people in the cities, unlike monastics in quiet places, can support themselves by their own means. There's some difficulty with this, we also understand. But if you don't arrange time for studying Buddhism and don't arrange your energy for studying Buddhism, I'm afraid your Buddhist study will never succeed. So each person should try their best to place the matter of studying Dharma in an important position. You should arrange relatively ample time for it. Then in your own energy and your own life, you must definitely allocate a portion. Now, in many big cities, studying Buddhism, for example, one group or another, everyone sits together, then has a meal, drinks tea, talks about meaningless, irrelevant, miscellaneous things. Then afterward, today our tutoring session is finished. This isn't called tutoring. At our Buddhist academy, this is called violating discipline, not real. It's truly like this. So I've observed that some practitioners outside are actually studying quite well. When they're together, for example, meeting for 2 hours, the entire 2 hours are all tutoring and discussion, everyone thinking, discussing like this. Afterward, everyone goes to their own homes, very skillful methods, but some aren't like this. Often when together, it's all just wasting time. I think when we study the Bodhicharyavatara, I hope everyone, whether you study at home or study collectively with everyone, definitely don't let very precious time be wiped away at once, exhausted at once. This is very regrettable. Therefore, for us, truly as practitioners, our own wealth isn't very valuable and our own bodies also aren't very important. What's most important? It's time. Time and life are no different. If a person's concept of time is very vague, it shows he's not responsible for his practice. We can say this. So each person should make some arrangements for their time. I think making arrangements is also possible. These past few days, every morning we require practice at 6 o'clock. The vast majority, 99% of people, have arranged things quite well. These past few days, now with sleep and many things, we've already adjusted. After adjusting, it's already become a normal demeanor. After this, I think each of us, it's not that we don't have time. The key is we ourselves are too foolish. In our lives and a days, everything has already passed. So I hope some lay people in the world, you've also encountered this. Although I, as the teacher, am very poor, truly I don't possess the characteristics of a Dharma teacher. This point I myself also understand. But the Dharma being taught, the content of the Bodhicharyavatara being taught, is very perfect, very excellent. Encountering such Dharma, everyone should treat it seriously. If not, many people in worldly society nowadays, all day long, what are they attached to? They're attached to worldly material gains, some very filthy and unbearable objects of desire, anger, and ignorance. Besides this, there are no truly meaningful, pure thoughts. If this is the case, then this worldly samsara sinks deeper and deeper. Finally, one can never be liberated from it. So everyone, when you have such a good opportunity, you should arrange your life well and arrange your time well. I think this is very necessary. Here it already says that the Bodhicharyavatara correctly and accurately teaches the Mahayana path. We teach it in two aspects. First is the title of the treatise. The title of the treatise is divided into two. First, the title itself, Seku, the translator's homage. First, the title itself. In Sanskrit, it's like this. Sanskrit, Bodhisattva Charyavatara. In Sanskrit and other Indian, that is, the Devas' Sanskrit. India originally has 4 languages, 5 languages, 6 languages, several languages. So here, using Sanskrit, teaching in Sanskrit, it's like this. If we translate it into Chinese, it's called the way of the Bodhisattva in English, or entering the conduct of a Bodhisattva. comparing Chinese with Sanskrit one by one. The Sanskrit title translated into Chinese, Bodhi means enlightenment. So-called Bodhi refers to the meaning of enlightenment, perfect enlightenment, awakening, clear awakening, and so on. Enlightenment also has the meaning of Buddha. From a broad sense, it also has the meaning of Buddha and also of pratyeka Buddha, that is, solitary realizers and so on. Then sattva, the meaning of sattva, here sattva. Sattva means bodhisattva. If we translate it directly, bodhisattva is also okay. People commonly say bodhisattva. And the meaning of bodhisattva is brave consciousness, brave awareness. What is brave awareness? It refers to those who haven't yet attained Buddhahood but are bodhisattvas in the causal stage. They're called brave consciousness. We usually say Manjushri of wisdom and brave consciousness and so on. So-called brave consciousness over many lifetimes and eons, benefiting immeasurable beings and liberating boundless sentient beings. Actually, in one's own heart, no fear or sense of trepidation arises. Such brave great beings are called bodhisattvas, also called brave consciousness. So here it's brave consciousness. Then charya means conduct. Charya means conduct, or the meaning of behavior. Avatara means entering, that is to enter, the meaning of entering. So adding these together combined, it's entering the conduct of a bodhisattva, as mentioned earlier with enlightenment, or entering the enlightened conduct of bodhisattvas. Then combining Bodhi, Sattva, Charya and Avatara all together, we get what's commonly called the Bodhicharya Avatara. What does Bodhicharya Avatara mean? Everyone should know. Entering, Ru. It means to join or to enter. Just now, what are we entering here? What are entering the conduct of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? The conduct here, extended, is the 6 paramitas. That is to say, we have now entered the excellent conduct of the Mahayana Bodhisattvas, the aspirational and engaged conduct of the 6 paramitas. So the general meaning of this treatise is also like this. What this treatise is called, the Bodhicharya Avatara, everyone from the literal level should also comprehend and also understand its meaning. If you don't understand, when many of us study treatises and study knowledge, we understand vaguely without truly comprehending. This is unreasonable. So for us here, this Bodhicharya Avatara, I think this time, many Dharma friends studying the Bodhicharya Avatara, I'd like to give everyone a common name called the Bodhi Institute. The character xue means to learn or to study. From now on, we will use this in various places because this can be used for Sutrayana, Vajrayana, and various sects can also use it. Not only when we study the Bodhicharyavatara now can we use this, also when studying other treatises or Vajrayana teachings, it should all be usable. So this time everyone in various places, there may be some at that time, if some people study the Bodhicharyavatara, at that time divide into some Bodhi Institute Group 1, Bodhi Institute Group 2. We can organize groups by location. In each place, this is also a kind of auspicious connection because there's the body of the path, the body of the fruition, the body of the nature, or the body of the treatise, the body of meaning, and so on. The scope of Bodhi is quite vast. So if we truly want to study Bodhicitta, we must definitely do it from our own hearts. In this way, members of our Bodhi Institute, saying it this way should be very good. Below, we need to understand. So in what manner was this title given? What we call the Bodhicharyavatara, the methods of naming are very many. Just like in the Samdhinirmochana Sutra, there are those named by location, named by person, and also by metaphor and meaning, and so on. Approximately 4 kinds, 4 methods of naming. In the sutras, there are also such records. Now in the world, everyone is clear. No matter what thing it is, the methods of naming are different. People have people's names, places have places' names, and outside, mountains, rivers, and land, every single thing has its own unique name. Similarly, our sutras have sutras' different names. Treatises have treatises' names. These names also aren't given without reason. Here, the methods of naming are originally countless, very many methods, diverse and varied. But summarized, there are these several kinds. Generally speaking, methods of naming include by the meaning being taught. Some are taken from the meaning level, including our Bodhicharyavatara, also taken from the meaning level. And what we usually teach, like the 10 Grounds Sutra, the great treatise on the stages of the path, and so on, some sutras and treatises are taken from the meaning level. Also, by the measure of what teaches, named by the measure of what teaches. What teaches refers to its words and phrases, taken from the number of words and phrases. For example, the 400 stanzas on the middle way, or the 300 verses on Vinaya, the 70 stanzas on emptiness, the 60 stanzas on reasoning, and the 50 verses of guru devotion, and so on. There are many taken from the number of words and phrases that teach. There are also some taken from function. For example, the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish, and some like the Great Liberation Sutra, and so on. Also, some taken from the function aspect. Some are taken by location, like the Lankavatara Sutra, taught by Shakyamuni Buddha. At that time, the Buddha taught it in the place of Lanka for that reason. It's called the Lankavatara Sutra, and many sutras and treatises named by location. Then some are by retinue, by the name of the retinue. For example, the sutra requested by the Dragon King, the sutra requested by Maitreya. Also in Chinese Buddhism now, for example, the Platform Sutra of the 6th Patriarch, Liu Fan's 4 Lessons, and so on. Some are taken from the name of the requester. Some are taken from the author's own name. These methods all exist. Then, by time and metaphor for naming. There are also some sutras named by time, like the Bhadrakalpa Sutra. The Bhadrakalpa Sutra actually contains all the names of the 1,000 Buddhas taught, so it's the Bhadrakalpa Sutra. Some are taught by metaphor. Taught by metaphor, like the Rice Seedling Sutra or the Diamond Sutra, and so on. These are taught by metaphor. This treatise is named by the first of these methods. As we taught before, this treatise uses the first method, which is taken from the meaning level. Why taken from the meaning level? We also know from before. We are now entering what? Entering this bodhisattva conduct. So we're entering this bodhisattva conduct. First, we need to understand from the words, the so-called Bodhicharyavatara is a treatise for entering the Mahayana bodhisattva conduct. Within it, this principle is primarily taught. From the words, we understand it this way. Then from the meaning level, each person from now on, truly, I want to join the ranks of the Mahayana, join the Mahayana community. This point, each person should make this vow in their heart. The purpose of our study this time is just this. Why are we studying the Bodhicharyavatara this time? In each person's mind, to gain some benefit from the Dharma, the key is what? It depends on our own faith. If you yourself don't have faith, if you don't pay attention in your heart, then the many blessings and principles within the Bodhicharyavatara may not be very complete for you. Of course, I think for each person, one is that their own karmic connections differ, their capacities differ, and also their aspirations from past lives differ. This time we're studying the Bodhicharyavatara. For example, if there are 100 people, maybe 50 or 60 people will truly have some understanding of its meaning. A portion of people may not only not understand the meaning, but not even understand the words. And another portion of people, their resolve isn't firm. At the very beginning, they listen for 2 days, then can't complete it midway. This also happens. So the capacities of the audience are also completely different, and the benefits obtained are also different. On the surface, we're in one hall at the same time, everyone's sitting together, and our clothing, language, culture, etc. don't have much difference. Why is there such a big difference in the outcome? Of course, each person's capacity and their mental state during the listening process, many are different. Some have their mindset very proper, no other distracting thoughts, single-mindedly focused. Probably each day they should gain a little benefit. Today I'm also repeatedly emphasizing to everyone again, I require that from our hearts. We must definitely think. From now on, I've joined the community of Mahayana Buddhism. After I've joined the community of Mahayana Buddhism, what's my future work? what's my future career? To benefit sentient beings with all my heart and strength. This is the main principle. This is the most basic requirement and direction of our Mahayana Bodhi. If we don't settle this on the surface, however we do things, however we practice, we probably can't become a true cause of Mahayana Bodhi. Below we continue teaching. What this means is, as I just reminded everyone, this time we're studying the Bodhicharyavatara. The meaning is to enter the Mahayana Bodhisattva's 6 parameters. Within this, the meaning is like this. Also very simple, but I think saying this repeatedly, perhaps some people truly relying on these words will generate a kind of vow in their mind stream, generate a kind of determination. If we generate a kind of determination, this is something very rare in our lifetime. The title of the Bodhicharyavatara is approximately named this way. What's the necessity of naming? Why name it this way? Generally speaking, the necessity of naming is should understand the meaning. Of course, when we name things, we understand the meaning. Worldly names, some are taken by relying on metaphor, relying on meaning. Some names don't rely on any reason. They're just directly, casually given. For example, our personal names, like Tibetan names, there are many, many meanings to explain. Auspicious goddess, auspicious propitious, and so on. Basically, most people's names have explanations. Other ethnic groups' names can't be explained. There are also such names, including in our world, for example, why do we name stone? Why is the word for stone named this way? There's no particular reason. This issue, when we teach logic, pramana, later, we'll also explain. Names, one type has a reason, one type has no reason. There are 2 kinds of naming, but when we name treatises, we should say there are some reasons. Naming without reason almost never happens. So why is the Bodhicharyavatara named this way? The reason for naming is like this. In the Lankavatara Sutra, it says, if names are not established, the world is all confused. If in our world all material things, all people, places weren't named, then this world would already be a very confused expanse. There would be no concept or method of acceptance and rejection. Therefore, the Buddha, with skillful means, gave different names to all phenomena. So the greatly compassionate Buddha, possessing skillful and expedient methods, also led sentient beings to name all things. Then the Buddha also understands or knows the method of naming all phenomena, this meaning. Especially because this treatise is named by the meaning taught, so those of sharp faculties through the title can comprehend the general content taught in the treatise. So there's another reason this treatise is taken from the meaning. Some sharp people, just seeing the title, immediately know all the content within. Just like in the past, when Master Zhiyi encountered the Lotus Sutra, he comprehended all the content taught in the Lotus Sutra. Later, when he taught it over 6 months, he still couldn't finish. Just one sutra title. He also taught it for such a long time. And for medium capacity, after seeing the title, you'll understand the basic meaning. For example, entering the middle way or treasury of valid reasoning or the Diamond Sutra and so on. After hearing it, you'll understand the general meaning, the general concept. Even for the lowest capacity, there are also many benefits like finding the text and so on. First teaching the title, others of other capacities can also easily find the text by this. If these few words, Bodhicharyavatara, weren't given, we'd have no idea in which text it's placed. How would we distinguish it afterward? For the dullest capacity, was the use of naming it Bodhicharyavatara when we usually look for it? It's more convenient. Oh, the Bodhicharyavatara is here. We know at a glance. So there's this necessity. This is the content and necessity of our naming. So the purpose of the Sanskrit title is to plant the seed of Sanskrit in one's mind stream and to show that the source is reliable, as well as to recollect the kindness of the translators and panditas. Here he uses relatively simple language to teach. So before Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, and so on. Why use Sanskrit to teach it this way? Actually, teaching in Sanskrit has several reasons. The reasons for teaching in Sanskrit, the first is in our mind streams to plant the seed of liberation, the seed of Sanskrit. If in our mind streams we plant the seed of Sanskrit, what benefit is there? We've also taught this before. Because all the 1,000 Buddhas of the fortunate eon actually all attain accomplishment with an Indian person's identity, attaining accomplishment in monastic form, and all attain accomplishment in Bodh Gaya, India. After accomplishment, they turn the wheel of Dharma in Sanskrit. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma, all use Sanskrit to turn the wheel. Therefore, the blessings and merit of this language are quite great. If now, each time we read a treatise, we recite the Sanskrit at the beginning like this, then in our mind stream we've already planted the seed of liberation. So not only Indian great masters and Panditas use Sanskrit. When this Sanskrit reached Tibetan areas, many translators, almost all, didn't translate it. At the beginning, Sanskrit such and such, then Tibetan such and such. Each time we open the Tripitaka, each scripture in the Tripitaka at the very beginning. Sanskrit such and such, then Tibetan such and such. Then when we open the treatises, more than 200 volumes, also at the very beginning, all use Sanskrit. Why can't this be translated? Of course, there are also 5 things we can't translate. For example, mantras can't be translated. When we taught the Heart Sutra before, we also explained this to everyone. But here, the reason for not translating is also this. So normally, not only do Indian masters have this tradition, also in Tibetan Buddhism, individual commentators also, although they didn't write in Sanskrit. At the beginning, they also use some Sanskrit. What's the reason? So that later students in their mind streams plant roots of virtue and plant such seeds. So there's also this tradition. There is this tradition. This is the first issue. Why use Sanskrit? The first reason. The second reason is the source is pure. So how is the source pure? Everyone should be clear. India is not quite the same as our Tibetan areas or China. Why? At that time, composing treatises was a very rigorous major matter. Generally speaking, after Indian Panditas composed treatises before they were published, before officially publishing, many great masters and Panditas would gather together and begin examining and inspecting. After inspection, if they felt this treatise could pass, at that time many Panditas gathered together. For example, if this person wanted to publish a book, then all the Panditas would specially gather together to research and debate. In this process, if this author won, if he prevailed, if this happened, they'd give him certain treatment, certain rewards and honors. There was this. If what he composed didn't accord with the Dharma or with worldly conventions, in this case, they'd tie it to a dog's tail and have it go around the entire city several times. After going around several times, they'd take that text and burn it. It couldn't be made public, couldn't be published, couldn't circulate. This was their rule. Some treatises not only had poor content, but also, whether to people's bodies or thoughts, were harmful to their health. If the treatise was like this, then this author would be punished by law. Some would have their arms cut off. Some would be imprisoned for life. There was also this. This probably exists in other countries too. For example, reactionary books. Some treatises harmful to people's thinking. Nowadays, some countries also advocate this point. So in ancient India, it wasn't casual or easy because it involved certain dangers, and they couldn't do it without sufficient confidence. It wasn't like people nowadays. People nowadays, for money, for fame, casually write some nonsense today, and tomorrow they spend a little money and get it published. Then it gets distributed everywhere. It wasn't like that before. Actually, such treatises have no value, no meaning, because their purpose is not to benefit sentient beings. Nowadays, many people, there are quite many authors, whether in our Buddhism or in worldly books, as long as you have some money, publishing this book is no problem. You can publish it right away, as it's very easy. Actually, this tradition is quite bad. True Buddhist treatises should go through such strict examination, strict inspection before they can be published. Then there's some benefit to the entire Buddhist world. So in ancient India, like our current Tengyur treatise collection, with more than 200 volumes, these are truly of immeasurable value, because at that time, tens of thousands of Panditas and scholars gathered together. Everyone approved and obtained them. So the source at that time was quite pure. Therefore, when we know there's Sanskrit at the beginning, this is transmitted from India. Since it's transmitted from India, this treatise is very reliable. So indeed, in Tibetan Buddhism, we usually have this generally, Indian treatises like the Bodhicharyavatara, Madhyamakavatara, Mula Madhyamakakarika, and also some logic treatises like Pramanavartika, all Buddhists, 100%, not one doesn't accept them. If someone doesn't accept them, then this person's faith and mind have problems, because we know as long as it's composed by Nagarjuna, by Chandrakirti, by Shantideva, then 100% the content within is absolutely true. Everyone has no doubt at all. So purity of source is also very important. Some people say teachers from your academy, texts from your academy should be very good. Not necessarily, because here we're not that strict. So all people coming out from here, 100% are all very good practitioners. Also not necessarily. I don't dare guarantee this. All texts produced here are all very good. Also don't dare guarantee. Including myself, sometimes I write nonsensical words into text, whether it's beneficial or harmful to sentient beings, but truly harmful, I think probably not. Because my motivation in composing is not to intentionally harm any sentient being, I don't have that. But the conceptual mind of an ordinary person also may not necessarily be beneficial. This phenomenon is very common. So when we study in the future, we should study sutras and treatises from pure sources, the most reliable. Among treatises, also those truly composed by great accomplished masters. This is very important. So when I translate normally, generally it's truly great accomplished masters and truly very remarkable masters' writings or their treatises I'm willing to translate, but some that others have doubts about or I myself can't figure out. I don't dare translate for now. I also have this thought. So when we study Dharma, purity of source is very important. This is what's meant by reliable source. Then, in addition, to recollect the kindness of translators and panditas. So why do we use Sanskrit at the beginning? Everyone knows India, the source of our Buddhism. First, our great teacher Shakyamuni Buddha also came to this world in the form of an Indian. When he turned the wheel of Dharma 3 times, it was all in Sanskrit. Later, regardless of which dynasty or country, there were very many translators, great and lesser translators. They also translated many of the Buddha's sutras and treatises. Later, some panditas, generally in Tibetan Buddhism, all translated sutras and treatises were translated by an Indian pandita and a Tibetan translator. These two combined are more common. At the end of each treatise or sutra, there are the names of some translators. These Indians we often call panditas. Tibetans are called translators. We often have this custom, but in any case, the source of Buddhism from India is very pure. But if the translators hadn't translated these treatises and sutras here, probably we sentient beings of this degenerate age now, our karma is also very heavy. Now, for us to learn Sanskrit or another language and then to master it, is probably a very difficult matter. So from our hearts, we should have a feeling of gratitude toward these translators. If we don't have this, we act indifferent, totally unconcerned, no matter what. It seems fine. Anyway, this treatise has already been published. It's so easy. If you have this kind of mentality, let alone our Buddhism, even some basic worldly humanistic ethics would probably be unjustifiable from this perspective. So I think as Buddhists, toward gurus, toward the Buddha, toward bodhisattvas, we must definitely have a strong faith and be very grateful to them. Always be like this. Every Buddhist, every disciple, if they have a certain feeling of gratitude toward their guru, if this is so, this guru's blessings will definitely merge into their mind. If you feel the guru is just like an ordinary worldly teacher and don't even have a feeling of gratitude toward worldly teachers, don't have gratitude or faith, then probably in their mind stream they may not obtain true learning. The ancients of our world also often say, when drinking water, remember the source. The meaning of when drinking water, remember the source. In the past, during the Song dynasty, in Chan Buddhism, there was a Chan master called Master Dajyan. Da is the big of big and small. Jyan is the Jyan of appraisal. So he said this, when drinking water, know the source. Awaken and realize by yourself. Contemplate its source. What it means is, we should understand the source of the water we drink. Similarly, is the so-called guru really far away? That is to say, here he means we should think of the guru's kindness. So the source of all dharma is the guru. So if you think of it and don't forget the guru's kindness, then we can say the guru isn't very far away. In summary, I just taught from three aspects. First, speaking Sanskrit plants the seed of liberation. Second, speaking Sanskrit shows the source is pure. Third, when titling, using Sanskrit, the meaning is we should recollect the kindness of these great masters. So normally when we study Dharma, when studying any Dharma, toward these gurus who are the source of the Dharma, we must definitely pray with very respectful and devout faith. Always think like this. In the past, many ancient great masters, their feelings toward their own gurus, their respect toward their own gurus, what was it like? Everyone should also be clear. So if we, toward gurus, toward these Buddhas, toward lineage gurus, don't have this kind of respect, probably the Dharma they've transmitted may not necessarily benefit your mind stream. Including even from a worldly perspective, it's also like this. Some people toward their own parents, toward their own teachers, seem indifferent. In this case, the knowledge transmitted to you by teachers and parents, how well you use it in your life probably may not be very obvious. If you feel that my current growth, my current wisdom, all come from teachers, come from parents, and have very great gratitude toward parents, then the learning in your mind stream will definitely be used in the world. So when we study Buddhism, we can often see this person's recollection of the Guru and the Buddha, their feeling of gratitude toward them. What is it like if they very much miss the Guru, miss the Buddha, with this kind of feeling? Then the words they speak will definitely benefit sentient beings. Then the things they do will definitely benefit sentient beings. If we don't have this, on the surface it seems like praising the Buddha, but actually you yourself have no feeling at all. You can't possibly move others. So normally we should observe ourselves according to our own faith. This is extremely important. Below we teach the second issue, the translator's homage. Homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This was done by the translators. Shantideva's original text doesn't have this, because generally in Tibetan Buddhism, everyone is also clear. When composing any treatise, after composing the treatise, later in the translation process, these translators, on one hand, so their own translation process is complete. The translation has a good beginning and ending, complete, with no obstacles in between. This is one purpose. On the other hand, they also, toward what they have the greatest faith in, that is, pay respectful homage before the yidams and Buddhas they most revere. There's this tradition. So who made this translator's homage? Everyone should also be clear about this translator's homage. This Bodhicharyavatara in Tibetan Buddhism, at the very beginning, during the time of King Trisong Detsen, Kawa Paltsek. Kawa Paltsek was one of the three great translators. He translated it relying on the Kashmiri version. At the very beginning, at that time, Tri Rinpoche was the 41st king of Tibet. He was an emanation of Vajrapani. His contribution to Buddhism was also quite great. Generally, in our Tibetan Buddhism, King Songtsen Gampo, Trisong Detsen, Tri Rinpoche, these three kings are called the three religious kings. They were respectively emanations of Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, and Vajrapani. Their contributions to Buddhism were also quite great. Especially Tri Rinpoche. At that time, he established a very large translation institute. Then from India, he invited many panditas. Our Tibetan areas also trained many translators. In this translation institute, they translated extensively and corrected the previously translated. Earlier translation teachings from King Trisong Detsen's time. What hadn't been translated was translated. At that time, just that three great translators, Kawa Paltsek in the two kings' eras, was the most famous translator. First, at the very beginning, his translation of the Bodhicharyavatara relied on the Kashmiri version. Later, during the later propagation period, Lotsawa Rinchen Zangpo, during Rinchen Zangpo's time, this Rinchen Zangpo, we've also introduced him before. Everyone should be clear. He relied on the Central Indian version and also continued to translate it once. Finally, during Atisha's time, it should be Lotsawa, Lodro Sherab. At that time, he was also a very famous great translator in Tibetan areas. Later, he also corrected and retranslated it. So the Bodhicharyavatara had three translations. But here, at the very beginning, it was also the main one. Later, these translators also corrected it, correcting it based on the Indian Sanskrit texts. So such a treatise, its source is also very pure. Moreover, its content is very excellent, and the words are also quite beautiful. Because this treatise belongs to the category of the Sutra Pitaka, therefore, according to the king's prescribed homage method, they pay homage before all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is the homage made by the translators. Here we also taught, according to King Triralpachin prescribed during his era, of course before this, many Tibetan translators themselves paid homage before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas they had greatest faith in. There was this tradition. At that time, the king, in order to distinguish the three Pitakas, required that including the Vinaya Pitaka and all sutras and treatises pertaining to the Vinaya, there should be a homage to the omniscient Buddha. Why is this? Because the cause and effect in the Vinaya is extremely subtle, very subtle. Such issues of accepting and rejecting karmic results, these are solely objects of the Buddha's knowledge of all aspects and knowledge of ultimate nature. Without him, the Bodhisattvas and Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas also have no way to thoroughly comprehend such cause-effect acceptance and rejection. So before all Vinaya, homage is paid to the omniscient Buddha. There's this requirement. Then regarding the Sutra Pitaka and treatises belonging to the Sutra Pitaka, at the beginning, homage should be placed. Homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Why homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Most of the Sutra Pitaka are all formed through question and answer style between the Buddha and Bodhisattvas. For example, Manjushri's Request Sutra, or Maitreya's Request Sutra, and also Purna's Request Sutra, and so on. There are many, many dialogues, mostly relying on this format. Therefore, the king required that before such treatises, homage should be paid to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There should be this acceptance and rejection. Regarding the Abhidharma Pitaka, or all sutras and treatises related to the Dharma, homage should be paid to Manjushri. Why? Only Manjushri's sharp wisdom can distinguish aggregates, elements, sense bases, dependent arising, and so on. All the concepts, numbers, definitions, and so on in all Abhidharma. So at that time, this was required. Since Triralpachin, Tibetan areas basically formed a kind of on one hand, it was the king's requirement at that time. On the other hand, it was truly also to distinguish the classifications of the three Pitakas. We can tell at a glance from the homage verse, this is a sutra in the Vinaya, this is a treatise in the Vinaya, this is a treatise or sutra in the Abhidharma Pitaka. At a glance, we can distinguish. So now in our Chinese Buddhism, although in the past, for example, Kumarajiva or Tangshuanzang, these also extensively translated, and truly in all of history, unprecedented sutras and treatises were already translated. But from this aspect, there's basically no tradition of homage verses. Without this, so now at a glance, looking at the Tripitaka, at the beginning you can't distinguish whether this belongs to the Abhidharma Pitaka or Vinaya Pitaka, very hard to tell. The reason is here. This is one reason. So just now we also taught here, this king at that time, his contribution to our Buddhism was quite great. And his respect for monastics, I've also taught this before. Generally speaking, that king had a long top knot. On this top knot, there were various colored ribbons adorning it. When some monastics or sangha came, he himself would loosen this top knot and spread it on the ground, letting all the monastics walk upon his hair. The king respected monastics in this way. After this, all of Tibetan Buddhism at that time flourished extremely, very prosperously. At that time, he also required that each monastic should be supported by 7 patron households. So it's not like now some of our monastics here, not to mention 7 households, even one layperson can't be found. Very painful, isn't it? Some people are like this. Some people are especially wealthy. Maybe they have over 700 households, who knows? At that time, the king required this. The king had such requirements, especially his translation work. Of course, we could say this. In our history, some kings, for example, in Chinese Buddhism, like Emperor Qianlong, Emperor Shunji, Emperor Kangxi, and so on, they also made quite great contributions to Buddhism. In our Tibetan history, there are also such great masters, remarkable. Protecting the true Dharma in the form of a king, there's also this situation. We should also, according to when Tokme Zangpo composed the treatise, explain in this manner of the king's homage verse method. Regarding the meaning of the treatise, Acharya Sumata thinks our treatise, this Bodhicharyavatara, the meaning of the treatise is like this. Acharya Sumata, this is an Indian commentator. Because among Indian commentators, as we also taught a while ago, basically now what we've translated of India's, there are 8 or 9 commentaries. Among the commentaries, the most famous is Acharya Sumata's commentary, and also Vairochana Rakshita's commentary, and also Prajna Karamati's commentary, these 3 great commentaries. Among all of India's Bodhicharyavatara commentaries, these are the most famous. So when Tokme Zangpo composed the treatise, he very carefully perused these treatises and composed accordingly. Therefore, on the surface, this ocean of good explanation isn't very extensive, not as extensive as what some other commentators wrote, but actually, on the most fundamental issues, he already referenced these treatises and commentaries. So Acharya Sumata thinks that the entire Bodhicharyavatara can be included in the excellent beginning, excellent middle, and excellent end. The content of this entire treatise in order, the excellent beginning is the homage verse. At the beginning, the homage verse will teach very soon, tomorrow or the next day. The excellent middle is from the homage verse to before the chapter on dedication. The excellent end is solely the chapter on dedication. He uses excellent beginning, excellent middle, excellent end, these 3 excellences to include. Our 3 bases and 3 virtues, a practice manual on finding comfort and ease in the nature of mind of the great perfection, is also like this. Here, he also taught from 3 aspects: excellent beginning, excellent middle, excellent end. First is regarding Mahayana Bodhisattva conduct, then general Vajrayana, then unsurpassed great perfection. Here also it's taught from the perspective of 3 excellences. This is Acharya Sumata's view. Acharya Vairochana Rakshita thinks, with the cause of composing, teaching the 6 paramitas, and making homage with gratitude, these 3 parts can include this treatise. He teaches in this manner. That is, the cause of composing is from this human life of freedoms and endowments is extremely hard to obtain. The first 3 chapters. Below, starting from chapter 1, is freedoms and endowments are hard to obtain. Then the first 3 chapters teach the cause of composing. The chapter on dedication teaches the paramita of generosity. Isn't the middle teaching the 6 paramitas? Regarding the 6 paramitas, the chapter on dedication teaches the paramita of generosity. Then the chapters on carefulness and chapters on right mindfulness teach the paramita of discipline. Then the other several, for example, the chapter on patience, diligence, meditative concentration, wisdom, these several in our text are also quite obvious. Each chapter name is there. But among the 6 paramitas, only generosity and discipline, these 2 aren't obvious. But these 2, so the summarizing content, everyone should understand. When we test later how all the content is taught, what Acharya Sumata thinks, if there are several big blanks in front, how should you fill them? You should think about it. Then Venerable Vairochana Rakshita. Some people may think, Vairochana Rakshita, what does this name mean? Oh dear, I've never heard of it, never seen it. Then you feel really sad about it. Don't be like that. You should first, step by step, understand everything. The remaining content is clear and evident in the verses themselves. The structure of this commentary is as follows. Let's stop here for today.
Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye Bandara Badna Sodargye